This is Ewout Driehuis at Threat Fabric for another episode of Fusion Fireside, where we're going to talk to Hákon Akerlund. He's a CISO at an Icelandic bank, and his responsibilities include stuff that usually is managed by a team of managers, from cybersecurity to anti-fraud. We're going to speak to him about what's special and different about being a CISO in Iceland. Hákon, I remember vividly when we first met. I think it was 12 years ago or something, and you had invited us to Iceland, where you live and where you work, to be part of a Nordic banking conference, right?
Correct.
I remember there were pretty much all the banks in Sweden, Denmark, Norway. Were there a bunch from Finland? They were all there, right?
In the old days, we had the banking associations for the Nordic banks putting together each year a meeting with banks from each country, where we did presentations around fraud prevention, cybersecurity, and that's something that has been ongoing. We have moved it from the banking associations to the Nordic Financial Summit, which is a new organization that was started up in 2017, where we do the same kind of work, sharing our experience, sharing the threat actors, how organizations are working to mitigate the fraud that we see around us today. I think the collaboration between the banks in the Nordics is amazing. I think we had done a fantastic job together. I remember the first time we had these meetings, it was in Denmark, and each country was sitting at their own table, no one talking with each one. But today is much more like a big family. We trust each other, because when it comes to cybersecurity, it's a lot of trust that you need to put into each other. And especially not something to not forget is, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's not a competition. We are collaborating, and there's no winner in this. It's just our goal is fighting crime together. And I think we do an amazing job in the Nordics.
Yeah. So why is community so important when you're fighting fin crime?
Different organizations have different view of things, different experience of the threats. And also when it comes to security professionals, I think we all know that we lack the resources all over the world. So being able to work together on a joint question is important.
How long have you been in the banking space?
I moved to Iceland in 2000, working for a vendor in Iceland. Then I moved to the banking sector in 2008, working for one bank. I've been with that bank for the last 15 years, and just moved to this position within Arion Banki less than a year ago. It's an amazing team that I'm working with.
That's cool. And then in your capacity, your responsibilities, is that all sides from both the security side as well from the fraud side?
Yeah, when it comes to my primary focus is safeguarding companies' assets, both digital and physical. So it's staying ahead of evolving cyber threats and things like that. So there's a lot of different aspects that you need to consider. We have the ATMs, we have the net banking, but most of all, we also see the social engineering being a huge part in cyber fraud today, which we didn't, as you mentioned before, we met 10 years ago.
Yeah. And how has that changed the way that you're dealing with these issues? Because I imagine if you're dealing with malware and web session takeovers or man-in-the browser attacks, there's a lot of technical mitigations that you can put in place. Well, what can you do when they're messing with your behavior?
Yeah, that's a different approach. So we have mitigations in place for all this malware or man-in-the-browser attacks that we see or takeover. But when you talk about the customer itself, I've many times been talking in Iceland about it doesn't matter how secure your login is, because if you are the users that are logging into the online banking, doing everything that you are stated to do, then these mitigations doesn't do anything. And that's what we have seen for the last 4 or 5 years with the social engineering techniques that we have in the Nordics. We have a very good authentication solution, which is built on PKI that is considered very secure.
The bank ID, right?
A bank ID. And when we have these kind of authentication solutions, you trust them, but the user is just falling for the messages that they are getting or the call that they get. So we need to have other mitigations. And what we see is user awareness, promoting a good insight in what's happening, discuss with other customers, being open on public social media and the news media to explain what's happening around us. I think that's the way to address the fraud that we see today.
Yeah. Is it difficult to measure the success of awareness campaigns, Hakon?
It might be, but most of the time you got a really good feedback. But you always think, we got it now. Half an hour later, you have another attack. People are falling for it. So it's always reoccurring. That it's not enough to do it once. You need to make people aware of this all the time. At the same time, we shouldn't do it too often also, because then the customer doesn't trust us anymore.
Right.
So it's trying to explain for the customer how to protect themselves. Because one of the things that I try to address with our presentations is also that it's not only banking credentials that are being stolen. It's your social identity. It's your Facebook, your Gmail. There's a lot of other things that the fraudster is collecting around you as a user. So I think that's very important. And I saw when I started these presentations in 2010, I had a huge problem to talk to customers in Iceland because I didn't have any incidents from Iceland. So I was many times talking about what was happening around us in the world, where people didn't believe it's not going to happen in Iceland. We had this Icelandic language, like the Finnish. We have the Finnish language, which is not going to target us. But now, today we are here, we have the fraud, and I have the Icelandic use cases. So I'm also trying to raise awareness through talking about what's happening in Iceland. And that works very well, because then people can put themselves in the situation, they see it's happening, and that's very useful.
Yeah. Are you fearful of Gen AI becoming a tool for the criminals as well in this respect, especially with Icelandic being a smaller language on the world scale, might be influential?
Yeah, of course. We already see the AI becoming part of it. We have the fraud in Asia, where they used AI to, image employees' management. So this is something we are really worried about, and how we will address it is probably with the same way the fraudsters are using AI. So we need to adapt and change our fraud prevention systems and how to act.
Yeah. So Hakon, you've been a community builder for 4 years, right? You mentioned you're doing presentations to bring awareness to people. You're hosting all the banks on Iceland. Just a few weeks ago, you did so again, right? And so how is the Nordics, in your opinion, different from banking from an anti-fraud perspective than the rest of the world?
If I look to the Nordics, we are highly technical. We are using electronic services. We want to do banking anytime, anywhere. I don't think we see the same action around us in Europe. So when it comes to the Nordic countries, we provide a lot of services through the electronic channels, which make us also more vulnerable. But at the same time, we are providing a great service to the customer.
How do you think Iceland is different from the rest of the Nordic countries?
I think we are very different from the rest of the Nordic countries because of the size. Also, one of the things we had during the bank collapse in Iceland, we had limitations on how we could transfer money out of Iceland. So sitting with my colleagues in the US talking about we had the best fraud prevention system in Iceland, everybody was asking me what it was. explaining that we can't transfer money out of Iceland. There's no big
Wow.
interest to use that kind of system. But of course, after these restrictions was lifted in 2017, we started to see the same kind of fraud patterns that we have in the rest of the world, especially in the Nordics. We are comparing what we see there to in Iceland, and we see the same threat actors and the same behavior. The benefit of being in Iceland is very small. I know the professionals, security professionals in the other banks. I can pick up the phone, I can give them a call. We also created a very early warning system between ourselves. So the banks with actual permission from the FSA. So we have a team channel where we can interact with each other to inform what kind of threat actors are at the moment, and also what kind of threats is ongoing. Is it phishing, smishing? And we're all working together to take down these sites. So it's not, if one bank gets targeted, we as other banks also assist with taking down the sites.
So how that is amazing, because you're at, let's say the amount of people working in your space in Iceland is small enough that you are actually in direct contact with pretty much every one of them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also we are involving as a FSA or central bank is also part of this. So it's not, we're not trying to hide anything. We want to be open, but it's a trusted community with a small group of people that we can interact with. We have the law enforcement, we have the, as I said, FSA, we have the banks, we have the telcos together in this community. And in that way, we are able to act much faster than I perhaps see other countries being able to interact with.
That is amazing. So the one thing I'm always hearing, Hakon, is if you're the contacts that you already have, for example, with telcos and law enforcement, can give you a big edge on Iceland, I imagine. But how about big tech? Because is like, for example, Facebook advertisements for fake investments and so on.
I think when it comes to the big tech, they do a really poor job in interacting in our customers' assets. So we have like the investment scams that starts with ads on Facebook with known people in Iceland, known people in Sweden, known people in Denmark, known people in US, known people in Australia. I think Facebook, for example, should be much more vigilant to interact and actually stop these kind of investment scams, because I saw a report from FBI yesterday that states that it's a 45% growth in investment scams in the US. I would say it's the same here in Iceland, and most of these investment scams are through social media. And I think the big tech should take the responsibility and work with the banks to take down these sites, because it's the customer losing the money, and they're losing a lot of money. I like what they're doing in Australia, where actually if you have big tech being part of the fraud, they will have part of paying back or refund the customer the losses. So it's not only the bank that will pay the customer, but the bank, telco, and the big tech companies. All three had to participate in refund the customer for the losses. I think that's the only way to go.
Yeah. So that must be difficult. So you're in contact with pretty much everyone else in the chain. Big tech is still elusive for you then.
And I would like to have a much better relationship with the big techs, because I think by addressing that, we can kill a lot of these crime gangs and how they interact with our persons.
Yeah. So you mentioned investment scams being up by 45%. Is there, what other trends are you seeing?
As I mentioned, Iceland has been fortunate to have these restrictions, but since they lifted, we have always been informed from our Nordic colleagues that the phishing is a big problem. We are starting to see that coming to Iceland. So we have for the last weeks seen a really huge growth in phishing attacks towards our customers, where they're not only using the phishing techniques, but they're also SMS. So that's what we are looking into now, how we can mitigate those kind of attacks.
So going back to, you mentioned like the natural kind of fraud prevention system that was in place during the economic collapse, right? And that took almost 10 years, right? Rebounding off of that. So of course, for many people who hadn't been closely watching this, since a lot of this had to do with banking, can you explain a little bit what happened, but specifically how it influenced you and your work?
It's hard to say. I'm not sure. It had a profound impact on Iceland in whole. People were losing the houses. I don't think people outside of Iceland understand how huge impact it had on the Icelandic society. But we're trying to rebuild everything. We are trying to do much better. The regulations in Iceland for the banking sector is much better than they were before the crash. I like that. We are being compliant with the regulations. We are also working with the implementation of the DORA, Digital Operation Resilience Act, which was enforced in European Union beginning of next year. This is something that will help us also. And then we have other regulations. But the aftermath was stricter regulations, focus on safeguarding our economy from actually further crisis, things like that.
Yeah. So I think you might make an argument that you actually rebounded as a country quite fast, because like you said, it was quite devastating. But here you are, and you're more, let's say, economically healthy and better than ever right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if everyone agrees, that's my personal opinion, but I think we're doing a much better job today than we did before. And I think Icelandic society as a whole is doing much better than we did in 2008.
So, Hakon, since your responsibilities are so diverse, right? You protect all the bank's assets, right? Your responsibilities are from cybersecurity to consumer protection, anti-fraud, and so on. That means that there's so many different disciplines that fall under your leadership. What does that mean for your working day?
It's a lot to do. It's a lot to do, but I also have a great team working with, so I'm not alone. So it's also it's planning, team coordination, making sure that everybody is on track what we are doing, and also one I think is the most important part is also collaborating with other departments.
Yeah, and I think that is a huge step, right? Because I know a few other countries that have the same principles, like we're not competing on security. But there's also countries where this principle doesn't apply. What would you say to those countries who do compete on security?
Yeah, I think if you're competing on security as a financial sector, and in the long run, you will lose because the threat actors, they are working together and they don't have all the regulations to follow. They break the regulations as they wish. They don't care about it. The only thing they want to do is get the money. So for us, it's so important to be able to collaborate. And as you mentioned, traveling a lot, I think it's important to stay up to date what's happening around us, but also with my colleagues then abroad to share what we are doing and what the kind of threats we are seeing. And it has, I think, the only way for us to mitigate and be better than the criminal gangs.
Yeah. So with all that experience and all the stuff that you learned in your travels, the communities that you're in, well, what would be your predictions for what are you preparing for to happen in 2025?
I think we will see a lot of more phishing in Iceland. I think we will see AI being used in some manner. I'm not sure how they will use it. But that's also what we do through the Nordic Financial Search, where we have this collaboration between our Nordic banks. It's sharing our experience and what's happening around us, but most of all, learning from each other how to do better. But for Iceland, it's the wishing. We haven't seen much of mobile malware in Iceland. That might count. That's something that we have seen around us in the Nordics. And we are somewhat, I'm not going to say too much, but we are preparing for it.
Well, I understood, of course. We can't give anything away to the criminals, of course. And yeah. All right. Well, Hakon, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. I hope next time we can do one again face to face. I hope it will be in beautiful Iceland, where I'm definitely going to visit soon again.
Yeah, definitely. I will offer you some volcanoes, active volcanoes. They're coming all the time.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Take care.